Good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Catsalon, and I'm doing a report on Barbara Ehrenreich's book, Nickel and Dimed. My family's sick right now, so they're unable to watch with me, but I have friends on Facebook Live, Ashley, Carrie, and Eric, who are all watching me right now so that I can record this for you guys. Okay. Hey, guys. Okay. So Barbara Ehrenreich wrote a book that was published in 2000 called Nickel and Dimed, How Not to Survive in America. And it's basically about her going from state to state, working in retail jobs or in the service industry as a way to provide for herself as an investigative reporter to see if it's really doable to be able to feed yourself and to support yourself with your rent at the end of the month. And that was what her goal for the investigation was and what ended up being her book. Did you know that in 2020 the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour? In 1998 and 1999, while Barbara was doing her research, she was offered about that same amount. So not much has changed since then. She was offered $2.43 an hour plus tips for serving wage. When I worked as a server in Greenville, South Carolina in 2010, I made $2.13 an hour plus tips. And then when I moved back to Florida in 2011, the minimum wage for servers in Florida went up to $4.65 an hour plus tips. So I really felt like I was rolling in the money at that point. But having lived paycheck to paycheck for the majority of my life since being in the service industry, since I was 15 years old, has been really difficult. The astounding costs of being poor are often undervalued. Paying for housing can be difficult. Other basic amenities cost significantly. How being in the right place at the right time and willing to take the job being offered that day can often be the only way to gainful employment. Paying for housing can be difficult. If you have to have first month, last month, and security deposit all at once, it oftentimes makes an entire class of people unable to do that. They're living paycheck to paycheck, often day to day and moment to moment, trying to figure out how they're going to survive or where they're going to sleep that night. They just don't have the ability to save $1,300+ a month to pay that bill. So instead, they're left to either couch surf or stay in their cars if they're lucky enough to have them, or group up with a coworker and rent somewhere together, or live in a homeless shelter or in a tent or a efficiency hotel. And they're lucky if they can find one that has weekly or monthly rates instead of just the daily rates. But either way, all of those rates add up to significantly higher than it would cost to have an actual apartment or a home to live in. There are often other costs to being poor. If your motel room doesn't have a fridge or a place to cook, you're limited on the groceries that you can buy and safely keep, or the food that you can prepare in your home. If you have no if you have no stove, or if you're lucky, you have a microwave in your room, but usually in a motel you don't even have that. You're lucky if you have an ice machine there. So having a cooler to store your food, if you had ice with the ice machine, that'd be great, but lots of motels don't have that either. And then having to wash your laundry, it's usually $3 a load according to Tretham at thesimpledollar.com. And I know that I personally have spot washed with a washcloth different food stains off of my serving uniform back in the day before I had a laundry facility, or I've also witnessed friends use their sink or their bathtub to wash clothes and then hang them up to dry outside. I know I've used an outside dryer line before. The cost of food on average, according to Value Penguin, is $550 per month per person in 2013. And people are unable to stretch that dollar if they're unable to make and prepare food that will last them for any amount of time. Residents in impoverished areas are more likely to suffer from chronic illnesses, such as diabetes, heart disease, and mental illness. They are all at an increased risk of disability, which in itself puts the person at a higher risk for the negative effects of poverty, according to the healthypeople.gov or an Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. Health issues arise and are often ignored by work or worked through. It's often seen as something that is wrong with your character if you get sick or you get injured and you decide to take care of yourself instead of being a dutiful employee and showing up on time and working through the pain. Barbara Ehrenreich talks about how one of her coworkers at the maid service that she worked at fell outside of a home in a hole and heard her ankle crack and snap, and she was crying, and Barbara said that she should go to the emergency room and get it x-rayed, but her coworker refused to do that, stating she didn't have the money and she didn't have the time to devote to that she had to keep working. And she kept working that full day, and the next day her boss sent her home. He did pay her for that second day, but she still worked a whole day with that on a broken foot. Einreich's book, Nickel and Dimed, offers other factors to consider, such as reliable childcare or family illness could seriously affect someone's ability to work, particularly if their job doesn't offer sick days or overtime or concessions for being late. Some big box companies such as Walmart and Amazon have a point system that when you reach a certain number of points, you're terminated, and that doesn't matter what the infraction is or how insignificant it is. There's no personality factor that could save you in systems where points are assessed based on computer models. Thirdly, often a help wanted ad or a now hiring sign doesn't necessarily mean a job is available. Being in the right place at the right time and willing to take the job being offered that day can often be the only way to gain full employment. Help wanted ads are usually a security blanket for a company so that they have an available applicant pool to pull from when their high rates of turnover are exceedingly what they have available at the time. How time consuming it is for an employee searching for a job by having to fill out resumes, turn them in, do the interviews, do the drug test, show up for their orientation, purchase the uniform, and then wait the 2 to 3 weeks before they earn their paycheck once their initial start date is. I know that when I lived in South Carolina, it was really, really stressful to not have a job, and that my ability to find one was hindered by not knowing people there. When I moved back home to Jacksonville, or before I left, I used my networking to secure positions and was able to secure some pretty good positions that way. So who you know does matter, and being in the right place at the right time does matter. Einreich's book, Nickel and Dime, felt like I was reading my own diary at times. Her willingness to delve into the other side of life as a somewhat investigative reporter, transplanting herself into a new city 3 different times and finding a job, working it, and seeing if she could earn enough money to pay her rent and support herself with food and feed herself at the end of the month was an enlightening book to read. She delved into topics many people aren't aware of and brought to light how expensive it just surviving is. She worked as a waitress and dietary specialist in an Alzheimer's unit at an assisted living facility in Key West, Florida. She worked as a housekeeper in Maine and as a Walmart sales associate in Minneapolis. Each position and experience provided new challenges and a look into how easy it would be to slip into having to worry about how to pay for food, housing, insurance, your car, and any other necessities of life. I know I've personally worked in every single field that she has, and having to live paycheck to paycheck and worry about the next thing added extra stress to my life and detrimentally affected my health, and in turn caused me to go further into debt with medical bills that I wasn't unable to pay by missing work and not having health insurance because it just wasn't offered by my job. Now you can see the hidden prices of being poor. I talked about saving to pay for a monthly rental is often out of reach, and even if it's physically cheaper in the long run, about the unforeseen costs of poverty, both in practice and in health, and finally, about how being in the right place at the right time and willing to help accept the job being offered that day is usually the best way to be hired. Relying on help wanted as is not reliable. Ehrenreich's book was inspired. If you've ever been in the circumstances she's described so eloquently, you will find yourself nodding as you read, empathizing with her and the drove of coworkers trying to survive. If you haven't lived it, she portrays the stress, frustration, and fear of not knowing if you will make it into perspective. She brought her coworkers to life in front of us, and we rooted for their success. She explained so well the true cost of living isn't just what's on paper. Who you know can be a lifeline, especially in work. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Professor.